Hello, and welcome back to the 6-5 Summit. I'm Shelley Kramer, one of the founding partners of Futurum Research, and on behalf of my team here at Futurum and the team at Moor Insights and Strategy, welcome. We're glad to have you. In this spotlight session, Futurum's Daniel Newman sits down with Siemens Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Ralf-Michael Wagner, to discuss the role that the industrial IoT as a service plays in the digitization journey. They explore how to find the right mix of local data processing and cloud processing and the difference that that can make for manufacturers. This is sure to be a really fascinating discussion. Let's take a look.
Hi, Ralph. Welcome to the 6-5 Summit. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it to participate as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Last year we had Tony Hemmelgarn from Siemens, and it's just always nice to be gaining different perspectives from different executives within the organization. And so much has happened in the last year. So I think there's going to be a lot to talk about today.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to share some of the insights which we gained specifically now in the last year, talking about industrial IoT and digitalization.
Yeah, there has been a lot going on, and front and center last year, the pandemic, it drew a lot of attention, but there's been a lot going on with data and supply chain, manufacturing, emerging industries, smart grids and smart cities, and just all kinds of things where IoT data is really going to kind of change the world. And we're going to dig into all that. But, I guess I'd love to start off by kind of talking a little bit of the big picture, getting a little bit from you on what Siemens is seeing. Indulge me a little bit. Kind of what are some of the focal points right now for Siemens with IoT and the business? What's been on your mind over the last 12 months?
So what's really interesting, is specifically looking at the situation we had over the last few months with COVID drawing so much attention, that the topic of digitalization for many companies has become somehow front and center, specifically when it was digitalization technology, which was taking advantage of being remote connected to something else. And therefore, IoT, and specifically for us, naturally, IIoT, had gotten way more attention than we initially would have expected that last 12 months, looking at the overall situation. So there was quite some dynamic which was created around.
Well, you have to imagine right now, as companies are trying to figure out how to, kind of navigate the post-pandemic world, how to, make their supply chains more resilient, how to manufacture and meet demand. The data is the answer. I mean, companies that are embracing a data-first approach are overwhelmingly outperforming the market. There are more tools, more solutions being positioned to customers than ever before, but finding the right solution is tricky. And what's really interesting about Siemens and your business is, you guys have deep and long historic roots in the industry side and technology, but not necessarily traditional IT technology. You're seeing kind of, this IT OT convergence. And by the way, we've been writing research about this for years, talking about it for years, but it is really coming to life. And so, as I'm kind of looking at what you're doing at Siemens, I'm seeing this sort of coming together of cloud, with some of the solutions you're building in MindSphere. You're working more and more towards this intelligent edge. You're bringing this IT OT convergence together. Talk about the decision that you guys made, because you've made a decision to really sort of have this hybrid cloud SaaS approach to basically being able to manage the fact that not everything can be done in the cloud, but not everything's going to be done at the edge. And so finding that balance. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that is actually quite a journey which we went through in the last few years. When we started the IoT journey, basically in 2016 with the introduction of MindSphere, we had basically a cloud-first approach defined for us back then, because we said, okay, let's make a bold move, and IoT is about connecting remotely to devices and things, in our case, industrial things, and therefore cloud has a tremendous advantage to actually leverage these kind of technologies to completely new business cases which can be addressed compared to before. But the more we got into that journey, and the more data we started to collect from industrial devices and build solutions on top of that, it became evident that not everything has to be transmitted to the cloud, because actually in some cases this creates some cost which you want to avoid, because not every use case has the same kind of value. So therefore you say, oh, that is data maybe I want to keep locally, and I want to actually transact locally or analyze locally, and only the results of the analytics go then get into the cloud for more longer term or cross-site comparison, these kind of use cases. So we said, okay, no, there isn't that edge thing, which was surely but slowly also on the horizon, that is in the industrial environment even more important, because it not only of that data ingest and additional cost, but also for example, high frequency data from vibration, which is quite a heavy use case in the industrial space. You want to analyze this on premise, because you don't want to have 20 kilohertz sampling rates streamed from a motor, which might fail in 3 months from now. We want to not stream that into the cloud for all the time. So these are use cases where we then work together with our automation colleagues, where we said, okay, can we do something about it to make this more fitting the use cases? And then we started on the edge journey and said, okay, let's have that hybrid approach. Let's decide where the use case, where the value is, where the application and the data resides, and make this interoperable, and so that we have an integrated control, meaning automation, edge, and cloud architecture for our customer, that they can pick and choose what's best for the use case, or we provide solution that optimally leverages these 3 layers, basically.
Yeah, and so this, all the kind of market speak about hybrid kind of turned out to be true. I remember when I first heard about Siemens and MindSphere and what you were doing, I'm like, I was thinking, when you kind of had a more pure cloud approach, I'm like, that's going to be hard. I'm like, I appreciated what you were trying to do, because so much of the industrial was living as a hard physical, separated network that wasn't really integrated with IT. But some of the hardened edge, hardware requirements were really spot on because of the complexities of the environment, because you weren't necessarily, you needed to secure them from other parts of the network to make sure these machines were running safe and didn't become threat surfaces for hackers. So there were reasons, by the way, but then you had latency issues, you had all these different things coming together. So it was like really bold, Ralph. You're like, we're going to the cloud, because people are going to the cloud. But I think the story is really, if I could say, and you'll probably hear this throughout our whole summit, hybrid is the thing. I mean, we've all kind of come down and said it's not going to be one or the other. Prem is not going away anytime soon. But we will certainly take advantage of the fact that for certain parts of applications and workloads and data, we don't need to analyze it with no latency. We can send it off to the cloud, let analytics do their thing, make assessments, business decisions. And then with certain parts of the same system, we're going to need that no latency, real-time information to keep our factories running, our grids, our cities, and all these things with no latency. So it's really interesting to see in the end, people that started in the cloud ended up moving more and more back to Prem. People that were pure Prem have realized they've had to move to the cloud. But I think you guys landed exactly where the market needed you to be.
Yeah, and that was exactly the case. Customers in the market actually guided us in exactly that direction. Because as you said, IT, OT, we were reading and writing about this since many, many, many years. But actually now it feels that the technology and also the affordability that comes with the technology is actually there to provide that. So when we first connected industrial assets with IoT on MindSphere, we brought a kind of a gateway into the shop floor. So the kind of industrial PC, secured, hardened, and easy to connect. But it was only a gateway, and the customers was asking, now there is an industrial PC setting that's only pumping some data to the cloud. Why can't I have applications being run on that and pre-process that data? It was a natural kind of dialogue which led to this development.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, everybody's got to kind of monitor the expense as data becomes more and more exponential. It's not free to move data from edge to cloud and back, egress fees, all those things all have to be considerations. And in the end, businesses are out to make profits. They're trying to invest in technology that makes them more successful, more profitable. And as data volumes grow and grow and grow, some things can move to the cloud, some things don't have to, and not all that data needs to be moving. So that's another thing everybody's kind of keeping in mind. Speaking of the ITOT, the cloud, the convergence, I happened to catch Tony Hemmelgarn, who I mentioned earlier, was with us last year on the IBM Think keynote. And so I've been noticing the company, Siemens, you guys have been really focused too on this ecosystem with some of these IT companies. And it seems the two companies are going to work really closely together, but sort of wondered what the approach is overall as Siemens, as you're working towards this more, public, private, hybrid experience. You have to be connecting to more and more of these different cloud providers. You have to be building, meaningful material partnerships because essentially a lot of these customers have, they've already chosen where workloads are being placed, and it's got nothing to do with their manufacturing or their edge cloud for industrial. So kind of what's the strategy there?
So from my perspective, and I think we have been walking in this direction from the beginning, not only in cloud, but also in the automation world, it's about building an ecosystem, because it's not one company, one supplier that can provide everything and all that solves the customer problems and serves their needs. So the ecosystem and the openness, which is, from my perspective, a prerequisite for building an ecosystem, you need to have an open technology stack to let others participate in your technology to provide additional value where they can build their business around. So in the meantime, we have more than 500 partners around IoT and MindSphere, from connectivity partners, consulting partners, which actually help our customers on their transformation story, on application and solution development, but also on infrastructure. And I think you mentioned IBM, and this was now our last edition, our most current addition to the infrastructure partnerships. So we started with AWS, with Azure, and with Alibaba, where MindSphere is available on all the three major hyperscalers in the world, to give the customer the choice. Because exactly as you said, customers usually have made their decision on which hyperscaler they want to work with, and there's tons of data from all other IT systems already sitting there. And IoT adding to that, even from the amount of data, a significant part of this comes then from the assets, and data has gravity. So customers want to have their solution and apps run on where the data is, and not the other way around, to also avoid the data ingress and egress there. And therefore, we work with all the hyperscalers. But there have been a set of customers and also a set of regions in the world. They said, we want to have that technology, that IoT technology, but we want to have that on premise. Yeah? So there might be legal reasons in aerospace and defense. There's regional reasons if you look at the near Middle East, for example. And so we looked at who could be a partner there to have that underlying infrastructure, which we use from the hyperscaler, being harmonized and managed in a highly professional way. And we decided on OpenShift from Red Hat and IBM as the service provider for that, to be the foundation for MindSphere if it's being run and executed on a local data center from a customer.
Yeah, OpenShift certainly gives a lot of flexibility and doesn't limit the future of moving things to cloud if and when compliance and regulatory becomes more friendly. We know there are certain industries that have extraordinary difficult regulation and compliance, and Prem has tended to be a solution for that, and probably will continue to be for some time, at least some parts of the workload, some parts of the data, in order to keep things safe. And with the rise of cybersecurity events and ransomware, I think we're going to continue to see that. Not that being on-prem fixes all that, but it certainly gives an opportunity to manage certain parts and maintain control, which is really what it comes down to. Is who gets blamed when something goes wrong? So you guys certainly have addressed, like you said, all the hyperscalers, or most of the hyperscalers out there. You've built a number of different partner systems, quite an ecosystem, which I think is going to continually be more and more important for this IT OT partnership. One thing I did want to ask you about is, Siemens MindSphere, the whole business tends to be known, because it's industrial, tends to be known for manufacturing, but manufacturing isn't the only place that you're playing. There are other industrial verticals that Siemens is involved in, and you're taking this technology to scale out. Can you talk a little bit about some other places where Siemens and your digital industry software are, utilizing this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly as you said, I think we are specifically strong in the manufacturing process and discrete environment, because there's where MindSphere was born in 2016 within the Siemens organization. But back then, when we gained the traction and got market adoption, our colleagues left and right within Siemens, so building technology, Siemens Energy, Siemens Mobility with the trains and train infrastructure, and also the digital grid and infrastructure colleagues, they looked over the fence and said, "Oh, what are you guys here in industry doing? Because we connect to things out there in our verticals as well," and we started to collaborate with them. So today we can say that we have now MindSphere in the other verticals, so like smart cities, like connected infrastructure, like managing digital grids, with quite some of the solutions and use cases which have been developed on top of MindSphere by those colleagues, because they have the domain know-how in those verticals where MindSphere was born in digital industries. We have the domain know-how for automotive, food and beverage, for manufacturing industries, where we can add the value and solutions on top of that as well, and build the partner ecosystem specifically around that. Because a partner ecosystem in building technologies looks different, has different players. The colleagues work with them day in and day out. And so everybody is then focusing on the same technology stack, leveraging this, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel in the same company, but justifies that additional on top invest then with their solutions and applications for their verticals and customers.
So one of the things I kind of take away from that is you've built a solution stack that can be modified, that this partner ecosystem that you have built can kind of come and say, okay, foundationally speaking, this is the kind of data we can access. This is the type of architecture that we can build. And while MindSphere was naturally built for the factory floor, the automotive manufacturing plants, and some of these true industrial hardened edges, someone says, why can't we use this for building technologies? Or, why can't we use this for, smart government or city type applications? Because the way the data is filtered in and accumulated, the way it connects to the cloud, the way that can then be turned into insights, you become an edge platform in a lot of ways for different industries. And they take their expertise, basically, they modify what you've built to make it work for their specific applications. It sounds like a number of different spaces have done this, and I think that ecosystem probably played a big part in it.
Absolutely, yeah, and maybe a pretty visible example of bringing all of these different use cases together is something like Expo 2020, which is in Dubai now, 2021, for obvious reasons, because there we have use cases from water irrigation, from lightning management, from crowd management, linking this to public transportation, linking the events to everything. It's like a small city with everything and every aspect which you can think of. Is covered with applications, and basically IoT is kind of the link between all these kind of apps and use cases and the data and the assets which are physically then on the Expo site.
Yeah, no, it's a great example. So to kind of pull things together here, you as an organization talk to so many companies, like we said, many in the manufacturing space, but Siemens has a huge business, very diversified. And I'd love to know kind of what are some of the key considerations right now that, from customer conversation, what kind of advice are you giving customers about where to sort of, make their biggest investments? What's driving growth, efficiency, yield? We like to say that in the semiconductor space, but in across tech, with all the supply chain issues right now, and automotive, of course, is highly impacted by the semiconductor shortages. But in the end, these technologies are being invested in because companies want to, produce more products. They want to deliver faster services. They want to offer a better experience to constituents in their cities. They want an event to go, like you were just suggesting, the expo to go to be more successful. All these different things. Kind of, what are the things you're kind of talking to customers about right now to make sure that they're getting the biggest return and driving the most growth from these investments?
Yeah, so it's basically in two areas where the investment is going. Either the technology like IoT and Edge is helping customers to gain productivity or increase quality, meaning more or less in their operations. And the operations doesn't need to necessarily be a manufacturing, could be a wind park, could be a rail infrastructure. So optimizing the efficiency of operations. This is one thing. The other area is actually identify additional fields of growth, digital services, selling applications, differentiating their products with something on top which they didn't deliver before, like maybe availability guarantees which they can charge for, or everything as a service, asset as a service is now also gaining quite some momentum. That they differentiate not only with what they sell as a product or service, but it's something on top of it, they're changing the business model. They say we are moving from capex to opex, which is also something which we hear since a long time, but it actually starts to happen now. And some industrial companies have also used maybe a little bit the COVID time to reflect on all of this, what it means for their companies to go in this direction, to identify new fields of growth with digitalization and software applications, leveraging IoT technologies. So these are the two areas which companies look into to actually get something out of that new technology.
What I love about what you said there, Ralf, is that we've had the pivot, and this industry doesn't move. The industrial side of OT doesn't move as fast in a lot of cases as some of the cloud scale stuff that we hear about. Having said that, though, enterprise IT doesn't move as fast as that either. So it's not only OT that's not moving, but we heard for so many years about like making sure that the machine, that you would know when a pump was about to go out. And this is what IoT or IIoT was. We're going to put a sensor on the pump on the manufacturing line, and we're going to make sure that we have some advanced warning. And by the way, that's still an important thing, being able to tell early before a machine fails and be able to order a part, have it available, be ready to install. That's the good stuff. But what you just said, and I want to reiterate this for the audience, that I think is there's been a pivot. And the pivot now is much like analytics, say in your CRM system or in an ERP system, might be utilized to figure out how do we deliver a better customer experience? How do we manage pricing and elasticity? How do we handle supply and demand for the customer at the end? You're starting to be able to go to these companies and say, we can use these systems to help you proactively develop new products. We can help use the data in these systems to, meet unexpected demand on a short notice, because we have the ability to understand capacity planning better with data. And again, then you take your systems at the edge in the OT, and then you combine it with, through some of these partnerships with that IT traditional ERP data, the systems of record that we know, and you start putting it together, and then the insights get better.
Absolutely, and this goes in two folds. So using real operational data and feeding that back into a model of your operations. Many companies, when they design a wind park or when they design a manufacturing line, they do this digitally and they simulate it before. But then the simulation model sits there before somebody touches it again. If you reuse this and feed the real data out of the operations while running via IoT in those models, you have way more exact ways to simulate and use these models even to predict and to forecast. So there is multiple uses out of these digital twins, which we usually refer to, which have not been leveraged to that extent at all in the past. So there's way more to get out of the digital twin than just to copy something or make a digital design and then have it in the real world. But closing that loop, we see this more and more. We as Siemens have certainly partially even pioneered that kind of concept. But now we see this really being adopted by the market way more broadly, and they see that closed loop benefit. That is amazing. That will be the next S-curve in productivity, I'm pretty convinced.
Absolutely. Well, that's what you should be focusing on. And at this point, I'll let you get back to focusing on that. Ralf Wagner, thank you so much for spending a little time here at the 6.5 Summit. It was great to get your insights, great to hear sort of the state of IIoT, what Siemens is looking at, where it's heading, and what, if you're in this space and this is something you're doing, what you should be thinking about as well. So, Ralf, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, David, and I wish you a very successful summit for the rest of the week. Thank you.